Seriously. Thank you for asking.
All right, we just need a couple minutes for remaining members to join us after executive session, and then we'll get started.
Just written.
Sure. Amy will be joining us in just a few minutes.
Recording in progress.
The March 4th meeting of the Newton School Committee. We will start tonight's agenda with public comment. Public comment is the opportunity for us to hear from the community. You should not expect a response from us in this forum, but please know that committee takes your comments seriously. You also have the opportunity to reach out to us at any time, either by email or phone, which is all listed on the school committee website. We have 3 commenters in the room, Lisa, 2 virtually. So we'll get to hear those 5 comments. Everyone will have 3 minutes to make your comment. Emily will give you a 30-second warning. When your name is called, please state your name and address for the record before beginning your comment. With that, the first commenter in the room is Lindsay Golden, and then Corey Pop. Oh, yeah, please step right up here. Yep, thank you.
Thank you. My name is Lindsay Golden. I live at 19 Garland. I'm actually coming, I was hoping to have an answer. I understand you aren't going to answer me today, but I was going to be asking this at the Q&A for the parents, and I'm sure that people are looking forward to having that rescheduled. But I'm going to go ahead and ask it now, or more of a encourage you to answer it in the public forum. Ruth Fuller had several weeks ago rightly said that we need to reflect on the strike and what how we handled that. And I think that that's very true. So given the past few weeks that we've had to reflect, I'd like to urge the school committee to communicate publicly and very specifically their thoughts and reflections on that. The simple fact that 98% of the educated professionals of the Newton Teachers Association voted to go on strike, and that strike is an unlawful action here in the state of Massachusetts, indicates that something went seriously wrong in those negotiations. And you, as the school committee, bear a lot of responsibility for that. What I really would like to hear, and I know many other parents and community members would like to hear, is specifically what decisions you made that got you to that point. It obviously was a failure. I don't really want it brushed under the rug, and I know that many of my fellow community members don't. We'd all like to move on, but in order to move on, and in order to know what it is that you are not going to do again in 4 years, we want to hear from you specifically what actual actions you did that were not correct. Now, maybe it's one of you, maybe it's all of you, but you bear that responsibility and you owe it to the community to explain what mistakes you made so that we can have faith that you're going to represent us and represent the interests of our community and our children well going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Corey Pop. And then we have Enrique Rosero after that in the room.
Hi, everyone. My name is Corey Pop. I live at 16 Hovey Road in South Waltham, and I'm a 24-year Newton Public Schools employee. I'm here tonight representing my educator colleagues in support of our NISA secretaries. Our secretaries are the heart of NPS. They are the first contact that many families have with our schools, and they see our kids through from kindergarten registration to graduation. They support students, families, staff, and administrators. And if you need to find someone who knows everything, you know to find your nearest secretary. Don't know what to do about your lost badge? Ask the secretary. Worried about a student and not sure how to reach the dean? Ask the secretary. A student let off a can of fart spray in the hallway and you're not sure what to do? Ask a secretary. Broken copiers, school photos, SAT signups, and the list goes on. If you need to know anything in a school, you know who to ask, one of your secretaries. I currently have the honor of working in this building, the Education Center, which has proportionately more NISA staff than your average school. So I'm well qualified to tell you that I witness their professionalism every day. Their understanding of and compassion for our students here and the organization and management they provide for all of our departments at the central level is truly unparalleled. We are a better building because of them, and we are a stronger district because of them. I am asking that you support our secretaries by being flexible and fair about the time they missed while buildings were closed during the NTA strike. I also urge you to settle a fair contract for them quickly. Our secretaries, custodians, and nurses are critical team members in providing a quality education in this district. All of your employees deserve contracts that are bargained fairly and that honor their professionalism. Additionally, more honest and transparent communication both to and about employees going forward will go a long way toward reconciliation and making Newton Schools a district we can be proud of. Thank you.
Thank you. And then our final commenter in the room is Enrique Rosero. And we have two online commenters, Joe Louise Allen and Sarah Moriarty after that.
Good evening, Enrique Rosero, 19 Garland, Ward 6, Newton, Massachusetts. Committee members, I want to commend the efforts of the chair and the superintendent offering more transparency and accountability by showing up to engage us in dialogue at public forums. Unfortunately, the session at Servas was canceled last week, so I could not formulate my question in front of other parents. It was unfortunate also because I would really like to have had the opportunity to listen to your response. Nevertheless, I bring it up here with the expectation this body may be forthcoming and responsive so we can continue building trust and make progress. What I want to know, and what many parents have been wondering, is how much of our money has this committee given to Valerio, Dominello, and Hillman LLC? Last time some of us checked, it was several $100,000s. It would be great to have the final figure. Second, when the decision to engage Liz Valerio was made, who else was considered? And why did you specifically seek her counsel? Third, did her compensation increase as the result of the strike? More billable hours, extra filings, for example? Fourth, what advice did she provide? For the most part, the negotiations subcommittee and the lawyer were in executive session, shielded from scrutiny, as the, quote, open session may have a detrimental effect on bargaining position of the public body, unquote. Now that the negotiations ended, would you share with us the counsel provided? And more importantly, did you ever go against the advice of counsel? And finally, will Valerio, Dominello, and Hillman continue to be your lawyer as you gear up to prepare for the new contract negotiations? It would provide a healthy dose of transparency if this committee decides to disclose that information before we have to obtain it via freedom of information requests. Thank you very much.
Thank you. As I said, we have two online commenters. First is Joe Louise Allen. If you could please unmute your microphone.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. So thank you very much, school committee and mayor and school chair and vice chair. I appreciate the opportunity to speak tonight. I have 4 topics, which I know there's no way I can do that in 3 minutes. So I'm going to try to stick to one major topic and then come back April 4th, which is the next time that public comment is going to be open at school committee. So I'm going to use some acronyms, and if you don't know what they stand for, please Google them because I'm trying to conserve my time. Okay, did you know that DEI is out and that DEIBA is in? We have a department here called DEI. I would give them an A+ in D and E. I would give them a failing grade in I, which is inclusion. How could our DEI department be expected to include support and education for Islamophobia, LGBTQIA, anti-Semitism, physical disabilities, invisible disabilities? They're not charged with that mission, and they really do not have undergraduate or master's degrees or PhDs in those areas. On the welcome note from the director of DEI this year, I'm just going to quote a little bit. She wrote, "These last 3 years have definitely challenged us to be patient, creative, and resilient, but it has also allowed us time to be reflective, thoughtful, and intentional. As we enter this new school year and my 4th year in this role, the collective energy to build on our anti-racist mission is palpable." I just wanted to underscore that. The collective energy to build on our anti-racist mission is palpable. And I think that's really, really important. And that's what DE of DEI is. But I won't repeat myself. I'll just remind you that I would give them a failing grade in the I. I think that our DEI department needs to become an interdepartmental work or initiative with human resources, student services, and facilities management. What does it say about us as a district that if the DEI department is overall trying to train faculty, department heads, department chairs, principals in DEI, that we have an example of a Newton South classroom in the fall. Sorry, how much time? I couldn't hear you.
30 more seconds. Keep going.
Okay. So what does it say that in the fall, there were 2 instances of swastikas, and one, I will not say the word, but it starts with an N and it ends with an R. And the principal of that school sent an apology letter to the parent community saying, "I'm very sorry that we had this graffiti in our classroom." So I find it a little bit offensive that the N, I won't say the word, and the 2 swastikas, and that it was called graffiti. Okay, so I will just, I'll just stop with one thing. I want to answer the 3rd speaker from the room. He said, how much was Ms. Valerio paid? You will hear from, okay, well, you hear from Liam tonight that it was $300,000. So, and I asked Liam to.
Thank you. Sarah Moriarty, please. Is Sarah there?
Hi, yes, I'm here.
You have 3 minutes.
Great, thank you. I just want to say I am a new resident to Newton. I've been here coming up on 2 years now. And I'm an educator. I'm a non-traditional educator, so I'm outside of the Newton public school system. But I understand how much educators give themselves and give themselves to their students, to the families, to their schools. And I know how difficult making the choice to go on strike was. I'm also an educator that was a resource for families during the strike and when kids were out of school. And to be, hearing from teachers, from families, from students, all their concerns, all of the misinformation that was put out by the school committee and the mayor's office, it was really disheartening to see. At the end of the day, I think we all want what's best for our students, and what's best for our students is providing for our teachers. You cannot pour from an empty glass. And if our teachers are advocating for themselves, I thought that was really admirable for them to take a stand. And it was something for Newton students to be inspired by. in summary, I think the Newton teachers deserve the world. The education system here is fantastic. The students are really thriving with the educators that are putting their all into it. And we as a community should be putting our all into our teachers as well. And that's my spiel.
Okay, thank you. All right, that concludes public comments. We'll move on to the consent agenda, of which there is 2 items. The meeting minutes and special meeting minutes, both from February 26th and an international and out-of-state overnight field trip, which requires approval, of which we have a memo. Is there anything that a member would like to pull from the consent agenda? Rajiv?
I don't think we got the minutes for the special meeting. Yes. We did not.
Oh, yes. All right. So we'll just stick to the regular meeting. Yes, thank you. Okay, there will be, okay, what was the title? Oh.
Agenda item is tabled, the last line.
The last line, the chair announced the committee discussed these increases. Okay, just a title to say that subject to that correction, that will be titled for that agenda item. Yeah, okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, so I stand corrected. The regular meeting on February 26th and the out of state field trips. Anything a member would like to pull? Okay, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda items?
I move that we approve the consent agenda items.
Okay, moved by Rajiv. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ping. We'll do a roll call vote. Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2, yes. Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 8?
Yes.
And Mayor Fuller.
Yes.
Okay, consent agenda passes 9-0. Okay, moving on, we have the superintendent's report as the next item on the agenda this evening.
Thank you. First, I just want to address the fact that the Zervis Q&A was canceled last week because the entire Nolan family was laid low by the stomach flu. So thank you for your patience while we contend with that recovery, and we'll certainly reschedule in the future. And of course, connecting and healing post-strike is really important right now. And to that end, I am visiting all of the schools and having conversations with staff, fielding questions, and trying to determine the next best steps for us to begin to build collaborative relationships again. And I just want to say to all my colleagues within the schools, I really appreciate the candor and the care the staff has taken as we undertake these talks. In terms of grants, it's a pleasure to note that the grants department, in concert with our teachers, has obtained a genocide education grant. We were awarded $59,750 for FY25. Plans for this money will be shared publicly after planning and development with our teacher leadership. Just a heads up to elementary families, early literacy assessments have just been concluded, and within the next couple of weeks, early literacy screening results and a letter from iReady will be available to parents in the Aspen portal in March. I just want to clarify that this is not an actual iReady report. It is a summary of data that is shared in letter form in Aspen to give families the information they need about their students' literacy acquisition in these early grades. This is a requirement of the Department of Education,
and it is a new requirement this year. So if you haven't received them in the past or think you haven't, you're right, you haven't until now. Next, I just want to share that we've made some changes to our timeline for the profile of a graduate process. Given the impacts from recent delays in the profile of a graduate, we revised the visioning sessions, and I included, for the school committee's benefit and the community's, a link to the revision of the time frame where the community members and design team meetings with administrators have all been shifted back slightly. The final profile will be finalized for the fall of 2024. And then we will commence the formal strategic planning process to create that 5-year district plan that we've been working on. It's just really important that we take time to process the events from the strike, work to build more trust and training in that area, and not rush this very important key part of the vision of the school system and its future. Speaking of planning for the future, I have, at the urging of many community members, including members of the school committee, reached out to all the families in the city who are listed in our database as being private school parents, so sending one or more of their children to a private school. We know that our database is not up to date, so I share it here as well. Not everyone who goes to private schools has attended the Newton Public Schools before. So there may be folks out there, and I am speaking to them to let them know that we have asked people to give us feedback about their experience if they attended the Newton Public Schools or their decision to send their children to private schools. I sent 2 things to every address that we had listed in our database. One, an artificial intelligence interview chatbot that asks questions about their experience. And then second, an invitation to participate in a meeting or to give email feedback to me. So those are rolling in. If you receive that email in error, you may disregard it. Second, I just want to get out in front of, artificial intelligence is just that, artificial intelligence. And we actually have run into a couple problems with our chatbot. So now I've been beta testing this interview software for 2 years. We have not had anything like this, but apparently the AI did not like something someone said, and it told the interviewee. It said, what you've said is hurtful and could be seen as rude. And so I just want to say that out loud, because I don't want anybody to be dissuaded from sharing even comments that the AI thinks might be rude. We want to hear from you. Please, if that happened to you, I have escalated this up through the chain at Thought Exchange, and they are working on it. Please pivot to email, and I promise you I will not write back to you in that way. We just want to know about your experience so we can plan. All right. And then more grant information and updates from the Instructional Technology Department. The IBM security grant has been worked on, and we are hoping to obtain it to improve our cybersecurity here in the district. And we are focusing on building the cybersecurity incident playbooks so that we have responses to potential cyber events. When we received that grant back at the beginning of this year, you remember that the team at IBM helps us and guides us and gives us information so that we're a stronger IT department. Also, just a focus on digital citizenship pilot at the elementary schools. So this is a joint effort between instructional technology specialists and our social emotional learning coaches. The IT specialists have launched a pilot of discussion prompts that can be used by elementary school teachers to engage students at various times in the day on digital citizenship concepts, including caring for technology, online safety, and their online brand. So they're working to make this very effortless for teachers so that it can drop into the daily routines of the classroom. And many parents have written to me over the last 6 months asking about digital citizenship and media literacy training. And I want people to know that this is directly responding to those types of concerns and to the challenges our young people face in their digital life. Also want to just share that the Disability Advisory Group has been composed, and there are members that that we are just publicly sharing with everyone, and there's a list of members. These folks are working with the Office of Student Services to embody our commitment to fostering a meaningfully inclusive education for all students in the Newton Public Schools. That might include giving recommendations on programming and services for students with disabilities, the district's work on anti-ableist curriculum, and supporting the conditions for learning for all students with disabilities. This group meets with the Assistant Superintendent for Student Services, Casey No Miller, and her team. And I just wanted to give a shout out to welcome those Disability Advisory Group members, Nora Ferry, Tracy Hatch, Caroline Laban Steiner, Jesse Champion, Asia Ray, Jack Lovett, Rachel Falkenstein, and David Clark. And there's an overview of this group in this memo and also on our website. I know it's very warm this week, but typically it's a little more frigid in March. But I'm thinking about spring and summer and those hot temperatures that we're sometimes faced with in the spring. And we are going into school later in June. So we have been working with Liam and Dave Stickney in facilities to begin to test the idea of adding cooling stations within the different wings of some of our older elementary schools. We cannot provide AC support to every classroom. Lots of parents call me saying, I'd love to donate an AC unit and those types of things. That just can't happen. But we are testing how many new cooling rooms and stations we can add into classes so teachers can rotate into cooling stations throughout the day. And this is a very common practice in older buildings. We also cannot decline to meet the 180-day expectation for the school year. So many folks are just saying like, yeah, just call it a day when it gets hot, like just cancel school. Can't do it, just like I can't cancel school on a snow day without making that up. Just wanted to let the community know we've heard your concerns about this and we are working to do the best that we can with the building composition that we have. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, comments from members on Ping?
Thank you. And regarding the update, just quick question regarding the DAG, Disability Advisory Group.
Mm-hmm.
I know we have the CPAC,
Mm-hmm.
Special Education Parent Advisory Council. So I assume this includes all the members from the community. They are not Newton School system members, right? How do these two groups work?
Thank you. That's a great question. So I believe at least one person is actually a staff member, but these individuals may have information about life with lived disabilities and have actual experience working with students with disabilities or adults with disabilities. So there's an expertise beyond just being an educator in the Newton Public Schools.
Okay. So, but this group will have more responsibility in terms of advising Casey and her team in terms of school policies for special education?
Working in those three areas that I listed, that is where we're seeking the most advice. But I just want to be clear that CPAC remains a critical advisor to the Office of Student Services. This does not replace that. It enhances it with more information.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you, Dr. Nolan. We'll move on to the next first item for this evening, which is fiscal and operational update. Liam, pleasure as always.
Yes, good evening, school committee. How are you? Thank you. Try to be brief. I know we've got our Perkins Eastman folks here behind me that's going to give a pretty detailed report to you folks, but really critical to give you a fiscal report. We actually want to give you another one in May as well. Want to hit some of the highlights and answer any questions you may have. So really, I would say we're right where we want to be in terms of the budget right now. We're projecting a year-end number of about $1.9 million as a carry forward number. You may recall coming into the FY24 year, make sure I speak in the microphone, we needed approximately $2.3 million. If you look at the top line, one of the things that might stand out to you is right now we're 2% less than where we were last year. Just remember that we have not yet, this is a snapshot in time. And so at the end of this month, we're actually going to be starting the new rates for our NTA members. So a lot of that 2% of our budget, it will be going forward. We'll be making retroactive payments and getting all those salaries up to speed very quickly. So over the next couple of weeks and month, we'll be making those salaries to our NTA members to as the collective bargaining agreement calls for. So I'll highlight a couple of big areas here. Salaries and benefits, obviously, to the good overall. From my perspective, we've got some unfilled aid vacancies. We've talked about those. We're actively trying to fill those. That number 8 can change almost daily. Dr. Nolan can talk a little bit about that. That's something that I know, Joanne, we're actively trying to always recruit for those positions, but this can be kind of a daily change. We've got some areas as well and savings as well with teachers, benefits as well, some savings just with the number of people taking those health insurance. One of the areas I just kind of would go to when I want to kind of, before Paul leads me to it, is really the maintenance line item. This is the area that really is an area that for me, I'm committed to trying in the FY, in this upcoming FY25 budget season, we're really trying to increase this significantly. This almost $600,000 deficit, again, it's one line item in an overall ecosystem of our budget, but it's a line item that we continue to get unforeseen expenses. And we talk about some of those unforeseen expenses in this area. And that number still includes the support from the city, the $410,000 that we've been getting the last couple of years. So I'm talking about the FY24 budget, but keep in mind, we do not have that 410. It's not expected next year. We do have the Great Educational Stabilization Account, but we're right now planning to restore that money with some additional money as well as the current plan, if we can do that. So we'll be looking for your support, and that's an area that I know that we really need badly. A few other areas that I would just talk about. Contracted services over a little bit. I think there was a question right now. We're projected on our legal bill to spend approximately $300,000. Those are not invoices that we've received to date, but that's kind of our expectation, what we received by the end of the year to spent on that. So that's our current purchase order that we have with our law firm to kind of get us through the end of this year. I think I would also just mention the tuition line item. So this has been an area that we talked quite a lot about last year in terms of that OSD rate going up 14%. So we were at a kind of a gross tuition last year of a little more than $13 million, and we're looking at close to $14.7 million. Another little spoiler alert, we do have got we're looking at another substantial increase next year, not so much due to OSD. I think the OSD is about 4.7, but we've got some substantial movements that may be residentially placed, costing some money. So just kind of talking about how fluid and how kind of volatile the tuition line item can be. But overall, if you look at the total number of placements, we have 5 fewer placements than we did last year. So I think we're doing a great job to the extent that we can keeping students in district. Another area that I think that we've been off for some time really has been our transportation. And I think this is the new normal for particular special education transportation. We've had significant savings there where we have students riding in vans. They're still trying to get to school within an hour. But these students, rather than being with 1 or 2 students, they might be on 3 or 4 students on a van. I think those are the main areas I did want. I think Amy, Steve, if you can promote Amy, I just wanted her to talk a little bit briefly about food services and maybe, and as Dr. Nolan mentioned, grants, any hot topics for grants. But Amy's doing an incredible job in both those areas. But Amy, if you can speak specifically about the upcoming bid, potentially any sustainability pieces that we've got on that, I think that'd be helpful for the committee.
Sure, I'd be happy to. We are in process on the Food Service Management Company RFP. It was posted on the 15th of February. We had a pre-bid conference and facilities tour on Wednesday of what would have been the February break. We had 6 food service management companies attend that meeting and facilities tour. We took them to 5 schools in the district. We thought 23 might be a little overwhelming, so we wanted to give them a representation. We went to Day Middle School, both of the high schools, Cabot, to show them what one of the newer elementary school kitchens look like, And then Underwood, which is our second highest volume elementary school. No point taking them to Lincoln Elliott at this time, which is our highest volume elementary school. That gave them a flavor for what our facilities look like. Blessedly, both Carrie Mastriani from our purchasing department and Dave Stickney from facilities was able to participate in that and help answer questions as well. We did receive a raft of questions immediately, which I took care of last week and responded. I think there were 52 questions in total. So the companies have what they need to continue to process their bids, which for any that do actually submit a proposal, they are due to us on the 14th of March. We have an evaluation team who will review those bids and do an in-person interview with those companies on Wednesday, the 20th of March, after which the procurement department with the city will help process those evaluations. We'll open the bid at the financial part of the bid. And after which we will be coming to you with a recommendation and request for approval of that food service management company. That's our overall process. I know that a question was received about sustainability, which for the first time we used a web-based DESE RFP template. We were able to personalize it, which I did with 9 additional comparative criteria that are very specific to our Newton interests, as well as I added 15 specifications. Within both sets of additional information, there is sustainability information. Under the specification, if I can just read you the language, sustainability is a major priority of the SFA, which stands for School Food Authority, at the city and the city of Newton. The FSMC, which is Food Service Management Company, is expected to prioritize their operations to limit food waste, reduce packaging in general, and specifically the use of plastic packaging, prioritize recycling and composting, and review procurement practices to eliminate PFAs in all purchased supplies, which I know is a new focus and interest of the city specifically. And from that, one of our additional comparative criteria will be to rate the sustainability plan that the food service management company submits as part of their proposal. That is relative to the RFP questions. I also have some information if you'd like to hear about some sustainability initiatives that our new general manager has started this year.
Please.
Matt joined us at the end of November and has already made fast friends with Juanita Trabert, the city sustainability materials management director, and they have partnered on several different initiatives. On the 25th of March at Newton North, they are piloting a recyclable program, which is a barcoded plastic container which kids can check out, much like a library book, get their food in that, they can take it away, and then when they bring it, they log it back in. It's an app they can use on their phone, and that we hope will substantially reduce food use. The initial cost to start the program, which is just the cost of the program, the actual plastic containers, has been generously provided by Juanita through some, I think it's EPA money that she has specifically for schools. They have started a Next Trex program with receptacles at all 4 of the middle schools, 1 at Newton South and 2 at Newton North, 1 inside and outside, and that collects all plastic, soft plastic bag packaging, which then is weighed and taken away and weighed by the company that make plastic fiberboard, and there's some type of promotion that comes with that. There is no cost to that program. Each week there is leftover food being picked up at both of the high schools. It's being picked up by Rescue Leftover Cuisine and taken to a food pantry in Waltham. There is a $20 fee per school per week, which Juanita is also underwriting for us. And then another thing that Matt was able to do, the bins that when you go into a fast food restaurant that you flip on to get the utensils out. He was able to get those for $1 each. He has installed them at each school to use compostable utensils, which is a major priority for many. There is a significant difference in the cost of the compostable utensils. It's $79 per box versus $15 per box. And Juanita has agreed to provide a pilot program for us to test what the usage will be so we can determine if that is an operational expense that we can undertake going forward because there is such a difference. So that's some of the things that in just a very short time he's gotten off the ground. This is a major focus for Matt personally, and it's great to see what he's been able to do in such a short time.
Great, thank you.
That's all I've got.
Okay. Any questions, comments from members?
First and foremost, Amy, what you're describing sounds amazing. And I think it's wonderful that you have this partnership with this brand new person, which is the whole concept of compostable utensils instead of the plastic ones, I think is huge. And a whole bunch of the other programs that you, so I'm very impressed, and I'm always impressed. You do amazing work. So thank you for you and your department. Stephanie, I don't know if you had anything to do with any of this, but I'm going to give you kudos also from the sustainability perspective. So thank you for that. Liam, I have a quick question about looking into our crystal ball for next year.
Sure.
I know I think we were particularly happy with the 57% reimbursement rate for special education through the circuit breaker. Do we have any sense if they're going to bring that back up to 75% where it's supposed to be, or do we think that there's going to be another shortfall?
So great question. So we don't know yet. We were in touch with Jay Sullivan, who's one of the DESE reps that we talked. He's a colleague of Rob O'Donnell, who we had on. Their first goal is to really try to reimburse the tuitions, and the transportation has been new the last couple of years. And so once they kind of fill the tuition bucket, they then try, and what they've said is that they didn't have enough money for transportation. We're taking a conservative assumption with our transportation still, so we did not. We had made some aggressive assumptions. We were actually overly aggressive, I think, in our circuit breaker reimbursement. Again, circuit breaker is trailing by a year, so our expenses this year will get reimbursed next year. We do think, in our expectation, just again jumping in FY25, is actually is still with tuitions alone, and I'm talking about these, still a substantial increase. We're expecting more than $1 million increase in circuit breaker, which I think is going to help us, and that helps offset our our tuition line and our special education costs. So the transportation may not be, but the problem is they don't post that material till sometime September, October, so it's very, very late. So it's very difficult for planning.
Okay. Thanks.
Paul.
Thank you. First, Mr. Chair, I want to build on Emily's comments about the work that Amy's been doing, and also add to that her creativity with regard to putting together the RFP for the food services company using the standards of DESE, but then adding Newton-specific criteria was really, really well done. And I think the results will show in the proposals that we received. So kudos to her on that. Liam, for the benefit of the public, I think when people hear you say that you're projecting a surplus of just under 2 million for the end of the year, I think there might be a belief on the part of some people that surplus could have or should have been used during the year for whatever purposes, whether it was the recently signed contract or whatever. But can you please reiterate that in terms of the multi-year financial plan for the district, we are relying on that kind of carry forward to help build the funding reserve needed to cover the costs of the new union contract over the coming years and to reduce the probability of a fiscal cliff in year 4 of the contract. In other words, can you just make clear that these are not surplus funds that could have been allocated to other purposes, that they're actually part of our financial plan? Thank you.
So yeah, absolutely, Paul. Thank you. Great question. And that is something I feel like for the last 3 or 4 years, we've been living on carry forward money, and it's been something that is kind of basically our own structural deficit that we've built into our budget. So not only do we get the allocation from the city, but we have been relying on basically around 2 million, and it's varied from year to year. Some years we've taken on even more risk than that. So in addition to the $268 million budget, we've needed to carry forward an additional $2 to $2.3 million to make basically our budget whole, to make sure we have less reductions. We've had 2 years in a row with some reductions. Again, the budget has been growing, but our costs have been growing even at a faster pace than we could keep up with. So yes, Paul, to make sure that we need to continue to make sure that surplus, it's really not a surplus. It's basically a benchmark that we need to carry forward to basically balance our checkbook in the kind of preceding years as we go forward. It's different than a lot of other districts do that. Again, we're larger than many of the districts. And as we look at costs going out into the future, that number I think is going to grow as we have those carry forward numbers. Keep in mind, we have a number of other levers that I think that we all are going to be paying very closely attention to. We've got this education stabilization account. I believe it's been passed by Finance Committee with $22 million. That's something that I think we're going to be very strategic on how we draw that down. But certainly in addition to that is going to be this carry forward number that we'll talk about. And the way that we do the carry forward is actually it's held in kind of our circuit breaker account. You can carry forward a year's worth in that amount. So for us, it's about $6.5 million. So we're actually able to carry that money forward each and every year. So that is something that we're going to be mindful. There's going to be some other areas in the budget that we're going to be looking at and thinking about as we kind of progress through the multi-year. But Paul, that number, we're relying on bringing that number $2 million to $2.3 million forward into 25 and subsequent years. And as our liabilities grow, without either making structural changes or finding some efficiencies, which I think is also part of our plan, that number would grow. So I hope that answers that.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Chris.
Yep, thank you. Any other comments, questions? Okay. Thank you very much, Liam.
Okay. I'll just slide over a little.
Next item on the agenda is a facilities update, including discussion and vote on Horace Mann.
I'm going to get started.
Okay. Good evening. So you have the facilities update in front of you, and then Public Buildings Commissioner Josh Morse has joined us. He can go over some of the items for us, and then at the end there's also some information about solar projects, which actually Josh could speak to as well, and a little bit of information from Parks, Recreation, and Culture. Go ahead, Josh.
All right. Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me okay? All right, great. Thank you. I'm going to go quickly because I know we have quite an agenda this evening. I've said this before, but I'll say it again. Newton finds ourselves in the busiest design and construction period since the response to the baby boom back in the 1950s. And yeah, we're very busy. As many of you can attest to, because many of the school committee members serve on various building committees with us, and of course, Emily Brenner is a mainstay at all of our facility projects, as well as, of course, NPS staff. So huge thank you to a whole bunch of people on that front. I'm just going to roll right through the list here quickly, but I can answer any questions at the end. Lincoln Elliott School. So we're well into construction over there. Things are going great. If you haven't driven by, it looks a lot different than it did a few short months ago. The site is pretty much completely stripped. The convent has been demolished. Our hazardous material abatement is complete. We are now in the process of putting up studs and studding out and framing the interior spaces, which is going to start to allow the building to start to take shape, as well as starting to hang our HVAC ductwork, just to give you kind of a flavor as to what we're doing. So things are moving along rapidly. Not too distant future, we'll be working on excavating and establishing our foundations for the addition, which, just to refresh people's memory, that is the gym, library, main office, and other spaces. That'll be an addition in basically what was the footprint of the convent. Over at Countryside, so we are in basically just beginning design development over there. Where we have some staff meetings coming up, staying close with Beth's staff over there to continue to refine the design, start looking at the details of the individual spaces. The MSBA recently sent us the fully executed project funding agreement, which cements our $20 million plus MSBA grant. So we're very happy to see that. Otherwise, the project is moving along quite smoothly. You'll see that on that project, the exterior renderings are starting to become more refined. We're working to soften the massing, as you can see from the intersection of Walnut and Dedham Street. And our site plan, although we have site plan approval, it becomes more refined as well. The floor plans are essentially unchanged since this past fall. Again, just like all the rest of the design, they become more and more refined as we move forward. Over at the Franklin School, so Franklin and Horace Mann are on similar schedules, at least the kind of 3-month look ahead. We are currently working at Franklin to refine our site plan. Today we met with the Parks and Rec department, as well as a good conversation at our working group today, focused on accessibility both for our playground and the site. As we continue to refine that site plan, simultaneous that we have our civil engineers from the design team working to refine our stormwater plans and our traffic as well. Those are both elements, a few of several that make up our site plan approval package. So we need to nail all that down before we can move forward with site plan approval. Our goal for that would be to start the site plan approval process with the design review committee in the next month or so, and then start working with the community and the city council thereafter. Over at and same thing at Franklin, we're continuing to work with the staff over there, and Mark and his team have been wonderful. Over at Horace Mann, similar to Franklin, our site plan is very, very well defined. Our floor plans are also extremely well defined. We recently met with the Newton Historical Commission, got some feedback on the exterior renderings and massing, allowed us to tweak our design just a tad on the connection between the addition and the existing building. So you'll see that softened. There were a few renderings out there where it was mainly brick. The feedback we got from Historical Commission was a little more glass. So that was great. It softened that transition quite a bit. As I mentioned, the floor plans are relatively unchanged, and after this brief update, I'll be going into the space summary as well. Same thing, we're going to continue to work with the staff, and Mark Nardelli has been great over there as well. And also just a shout out to Emily Bard, who is a Horace Mann staff who serves on our working group, which I think is very useful as well. Free cash. So we hit the ground running. Thank you to Mayor Fuller, making quite a bit of free cash available for quite a few projects at Newton Public Schools. So the City Council recently approved those projects at North, South, Bigelow, Brown, Pierce, Mason, Rice, Bowen, Memorial, Spalding, and Williams. Those are all moving forward. The day after they were approved, we started getting things in motion with our various design teams and contractors, working with David Stickney and his team to try to set up and complete the vast majority of this work over the summer. And then, as Stephanie mentioned, our solar project. So we are happily moving forward with 8 sites, 6 of which over at Newton Public Schools. This works out to 1.5 million kilowatt hours, and this will put us up at 40% of our total municipal electricity consumption now being generated by solar power. So the exact language there, I just want to point out that we have different solar systems at different sites. Some are direct feed, some are not. But the bottom line is we are generating the equivalent of 40% of our municipal electricity consumption, which is quite a milestone. That's big picture on our facility projects. I know Stephanie mentioned Parks and Rec as well. Parks and Rec is getting ready to mobilize on several field projects in and around the schools. I believe they have another community meeting coming up soon, and I think their goal is to finalize the design and get started this summer. So you folks may have seen over at the Burr School on the fields, they're starting to stockpile some clean soil, actually from our Gaff Pool project, because the Burr Field project will require import of soil rather. So it saves Gaff Pool project some money, and it also saves the Burr School or the Burr Fields project some money as well, and reduces our carbon footprint by not trucking soil all over the place. That's it for the facilities updates. Are there any questions on those before I pull up the Horace Mann space summary?
Any questions? Yep, Tamika.
Thanks, Chris. Josh, one, I think it's brilliant, the use of the soil from the pool to the Burr Field projects. That's wonderful in terms of sustainability and just low cost. I do have a question about the parcel of land adjacent to Williams School. I know that's not contained here within your update, but we have a community meeting on Wednesday with the Williams folks, and I wonder if this might come up as something that folks are wondering about, as I'm wondering about it.
Perhaps I'll lead off, Josh, if you like.
Sure. Absolutely.
The Walker Center has kind of two distinct parts to it. One I'll call the taller building, and the other are the smaller houses. A number of the smaller houses, it's kind of confusing exactly how many buildings there are versus units. They're slightly different. We are actively working with a consultant to help turn them into 100% affordable housing units. In addition, though, there is land that's contiguous with, I'll call it the playground area, that will allow us to extend the area of the Williams School land area more. So we look forward to working with the Williams community and working out the exact lines for that in the coming months. Josh, what would you expand on? Or Stephanie could probably also do it.
I think you hit the nail on the head, Mayor. Covered most everything that I would say. The other thing I would just point out is that this is any time where there's an opportunity to secure land next to a school site, it should be something that we take a look at. In this case, we did. And I think what makes it even more interesting in this case is that the Williams School site is relatively small, and it presents some site challenges even as it stands today. So the opportunity to secure some land and land bank that for the future is a very wise strategic move. And we get a whole bunch of family-friendly, affordable housing to boot. So that's all I would add.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other questions for Josh? Okay.
Okay, can everybody see my screen? And please let me know if you want me to zoom in.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Maybe like zoom in about 20 times, Josh, and
Perfect.
I'm always the one asking Josh to zoom, all of our presentations got to zoom in.
Got to try to get this into a size that works. Yeah. That might be as big as I can get it and still see the whole screen if that works for folks.
I have it.
Okay. So this evening, I don't plan on going line by line through this entire document unless people really want to go to bed easily this evening. So, but I'm going to touch upon the high points. So from a very high level, I just want to take a step back. Back in March of 2022, the school committee voted to establish the design enrollment of 396 to 414 students for the Horace Mann School. So from March of 2022 to the fall of 2022, we continued to work on the feasibility phase for this project, evaluating lots of different options with respect to the building addition. And with that study, there were a lot of different possible scenarios for the addition, for the renovation, which is why we didn't present a space summary along with the design enrollment back then, because quite frankly, we needed more time to work that out. In the fall of 2022, about 6 months later, the override campaign started. The project, like the others within the override, were put on pause while we focused on the override campaign itself. The project was then on pause from the fall of 2022 until approximately August of 2023. The Newton Retirement Board voted in June of 2023, which allowed us to secure funding in July of 2023, but the project got going in August. That was not so long ago. We got started in the fall and started kind of re-engaging with the community, dusting off the plans, really getting ramped up. Our intent was actually to come to the school committee, I think in January, to have this discussion, but you all were a little busy at the moment. So we rescheduled, and here we are this evening. So big picture, I would say that one thing that really stands out on this document is that I'm actually very proud of the work that the whole team has done. Gene Raymond and his whole team, Mark Nardelli, folks at NPS and my team, the whole working group in the building committee, because this was tough to get a lot of these spaces to meet the MSBA guidelines when we're dealing with an existing asset. That's always challenging. So big picture, the classrooms all look really good. When folks may remember when we first met with the Horace Mann community shortly after moving over to 225 Nevada Street, classroom size was a major issue. Our classroom sizes are all either at or above, with the exception of a few that are literally 2 inches or less around the perimeter, smaller than where we would want them to be. So they're really, the classrooms are on point. Our support spaces really look good, pretty much straight down the line. There were just a few areas that I would point out as I'm going down through. You'll notice our literacy room, our target was 900 square feet. We're at 766. This is slightly, so first of all, we went over this with Mark Nardelli and his team, and they were comfortable with this. But I would also point out that anytime you're doing an ad reno, some spaces may come in a little low, but a lot of spaces also come in a little higher because you're, again, utilizing an existing asset. So if you take a look, our literacy specialist space target was 175, is actually 222. Because the literacy room is also the book room, this is also it's kind of a hybrid storage area. So these extra square feet in some of these other locations help offset that difference. The gymnasium. So this is something that we talked about early and often with the Horace Mann community. Mark and his team felt quite confident that the gym itself was serviceable. It's not something that was a major issue with them. But what they did ask for was that with keeping the gym, that we focus on making sure that we had adequate storage and a PE office. As such, you can see the gym storeroom, which in our gyms oftentimes is dual purpose with the PE office as well, is quite ample. This is actually larger than what we have at Angel Service and Cabot by a decent amount. So we met the mark on that front. The cafeteria. So this is a little interesting one. I just want to point out that you'll start to see, and we did this with Lincoln Elliott, we're doing it here too, the introduction of the lunch bunch program and space. So Lunch Bunch is actually not recognized in the MSBA templates. So if you're comparing the square footage to the MSBA guidelines, you need to add this 153 to the 2793. So we are about 24 square feet shy, or about 2 inches off the perimeter from MSBA guidelines here. So we're basically there. That's 2 inches could literally be, radiant heat along the edge of the space, or furrowing out the walls from 4-inch to 6-inch. So we're pretty good shape there. The only other one that I flagged, the nurses' exam room, is a little shy, but that's an existing condition that Mark felt comfortable with and his staff. And then Mark Nardelli's, the principal's office. So this is the last one I would point out. This looks like we really don't like Mark, but we love the man. What this really is that with the MSBA template, if you actually look at the nomenclature, it will say principal's office and conference area. So for MSBA guidelines, the principal's office is also a conference room, which is why you see that target of 425 square feet. Over in our Horace Mann plans, we're utilizing an existing office at 169, which is a good size office, but we have an oversized conference room. The target was 225. The end result is 405. So between these two, Mark Nardelli was quite comfortable with the plans. Overall, what you'll see is that our totals and our nets for square footage are pretty much exactly where we had them, plus or minus a few hundred square feet a year ago. So we're really right where we've been for quite some time. But I think big picture, the reason why we're coming to you tonight is twofold. One, we want to get the school committee's blessing on this, but two, we're far enough along in the design that I think that we're pretty comfortable with where we're at. And I would just add that, as is the case with all of our projects, we asked the school committee to vote on this space summary, but the exact numbers do change just a little bit as we move forward. We evaluate each space, and if there's opportunities to improve, we do, and we update the school committee along the way as we do that. Happy to answer any questions folks may have.
All right. Thank you, Josh. Is there any questions? Yes, Emily, please.
I feel like I need to explain what Lunch Bunch is, because I feel like not everybody knows what that means. So just as an FYI, what we're doing in our newer schools is within the cafeteria, we're including a small separate space, ideally with glass. So students who may have sensory issues, who can't deal with the sound and the bustle and the noise necessarily within the lunchroom itself, are able to participate in lunch and be in a smaller space, but is still part of the lunchroom. It's not like an enclosed space where there's not even a window. So that is what Lunch Bunch is. And then sometimes they're just, special pull-out groups of kids who have similar interests who want to be able to have lunch together in a quieter space. So that's what Lunch Bunch is.
Thank you for that clarification. Any other questions? Okay. I guess you covered it so thoroughly, Josh. I believe there is an ask for a school committee vote to approve the space summary. So with that, I'd ask if there's a motion to approve.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the space summary for Horace Mann.
Motion by Emily.
I second.
Seconded by Rajiv. Is there any further discussion? Okay. With that, we'll take a vote. Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2 is yes. Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 8?
Yes.
And Mayor Fuller.
An excited yes.
Okay.
Thank
That is, Lisa, for the record, 8 yeses, 1 excited yes.
you.
All right. Thank you very much, Josh. Appreciate it as always.
My pleasure. Anytime.
Okay, that'll bring us to Perkins Eastman. We have Perkins Eastman, who conducted a study of our space utilization and facility conditions, and we have a report on that.
And I'm going to let them introduce themselves. I'm going to just step back so they can sit forward here. Oh, yeah. Okay. I'll grab that.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you for having us. Thank you for inviting us. My name is Joe Drown. I'm here today, this evening with Bob Bell and Peter Romaines from Perkins Eastman Architects. We've been working for the last almost year with the school department to evaluate a number of buildings. We started off back in spring of 2023, working with specifically Underwood and Ward. And that has now expanded to an additional 6 schools. But I'd like to back up and just say that the intent of the study is really to collect data. So the school department has sufficient information to be able to build upon this information that we're creating or reporting on to create a long-range enrollment and facilities plan. The 6 additional schools that we're including, in addition to Ward and Underwood, includes Bowen, Burr, Mason Rice, Memorial, Spalding, Pierce, and Williams. The 8 schools together represent the schools in the district which have not yet received renovations or constructions, either through MSBA or self-funded. The study is really representing a snapshot in time. That's to say that the current utilizations that you will see today will change over time with fluctuations in enrollment and district programming, as well as instructional programs, which all evolve over time. The district enrollment is based on optimal class size and not capacity. The capacity of a building is based upon the space utilization. And Bob will get more into space utilization, and Peter will get into our building conditions evaluations.
Okay, so I'll start us off. We're going to begin with the takeaways in a way, you know, a bit of what we found along the way, and then we'll dive into the detail and show you how we got to that. I will talk about space utilization, and Peter, as Joe said, facilities condition. So as far as the big takeaways, assessing the spaces, we could see that Pierce, Ward, and Williams seem to have the most available capacity within them. We see, as we look system-wide across the 8 schools, that general classrooms tend to be good sizes. They're a bit smaller at Underwood and Ward, more in the range of 74 to 78% of what we would consider the design program. Kindergarten rooms generally are a good size as well. We do see at Bowen, Mason Rice, and Ward that they are also a bit smaller, closer to about the 80% mark of what the educational program is. Of all the spaces within the space summary, within your educational program, libraries and kitchens really stand out kind of across all of the schools as being the most undersized. Music rooms are probably follow close behind. All the schools have similar shared or missing spaces, and that is breakout space, purpose-built breakout space for small group work. Storage is pretty popular as far as maybe considered a missing space. Conference rooms, and then various support spaces are significantly shared. This does not mean that these programs and these needs don't occur. They just occur within shared space or creative use of space, including corridors and other areas. Gymnasiums tend to be a one station in size, and in the MSBA in the Newton Public Schools program, that's about 3,000 square feet per station. They're all pretty close. There's one that's a bit under, I believe that's at Bowen. Mason Rice's auditorium is also the cafeteria, so a cafetorium. Ward's auditorium is also in the gymnasium, so there's a shared space there, so that's notable. All 8 schools except for Burr and Underwood have auditorium space. So those, from a spatial point of view, are some highlights. We'll keep rolling and then maybe take questions. So highlights from the conditions.
So in terms of building condition, we surveyed all 8 schools. Underwood and Ward were the first last April and May, and then the other 6 schools were in December of last year. Based on our observations of the buildings, as well as information that was provided to us from previous facilities assessments from Newton Public Buildings, we feel that our conclusions are that these are the 3 schools that represent the most in need of repair, being Ward, Underwood, and we're adding Pierce to that list as well, of the 6 new schools that we studied this year. And so for the following reasons, basically. For Ward, it really comes down to the age of the school, as well as for Underwood. They're both 100 years old now, and so their building systems are at or beyond the useful life. Specifically for Ward, one of the 2 boilers is not functioning anymore, so there's no redundancy, and it's operating on steam. The other thing about Ward is that I think the accessibility challenge is acutely felt there because there is no elevator. So getting through the building with an accessible route is very challenging right now. It is a multi-story building and split level. For Underwood, it's a similar story. There are some accessibility challenges, but it's also the age of the school. And I think particularly we saw that the gym roof condition is in need of significant repair and replacement in terms of the membrane that goes on top of it. And then as far as Pierce, again, it's a similar story about the boilers in that there's only one functioning right now. They are original to the school. And it's also one of the only remaining oil boilers in the district as well. And there's similar, well, note similarly that there's some accessibility challenges getting up and down through the school and on site.
And so if we start to dive into the content specifically, we're not going to go into all 8 schools in detail. We're going to show a couple as an example, starting with really the space assessment. So our work included a review of your existing documents and drawings, walkthroughs and visual observations, meetings with the principals, the special ed director, and with Newton Public Buildings. We've created these very simple, intentionally diagrammatic floor plans that include only the pertinent information. So they're really space plans that are color-coded according to the Newton Public Schools program colors. It includes the square footage of each room. We've also included the room numbers, which is great reference because a lot of your data, such as phone lists and other information, are connected to the room numbers. So it's a useful resource. We designate differently in the plans as well as in the space summary modular construction, aside from what I would call permanent construction. And of course, we've got an abbreviation legend to keep the sheets from being too busy with net and gross total square footage for each school. So I'm showing you Bowen as an example. Following the plans, each school has kind of again, on space utilization, a summary data sheet. What we're looking at are from top to bottom on the left-hand side, the core academic spaces on the top. So that's classroom, kindergarten, and grade level classrooms. We're then looking at the unified art spaces or related art spaces in the middle. And at the bottom is the cafeteria. And within those charts, if we move from left to right, we can see the designation of rooms, what is the educational program square footage versus the actual square footage. And then we generate the percentage of the existing versus the program size. On the very far right, you can see we also just took the kindergarten and general classrooms and did a little graphic chart so you can easily see how the classrooms are measuring up compared to the ed program. We, in the middle, continuing to move from left to right, we account for the number of classrooms in each school, the enrollment, and then generate the average class size. This also allows us to compare that against the design enrollment. And for this sake, the design enrollment would be filling each room with the number of seats that are the target class sizes, according to the grade level. And then on the far right of that chart, we show then the percentage, the utilization of the room. So existing enrollment average or for the grade levels versus what the design enrollment would be. So that's where we get the percentages. In the middle, where we have the related arts, it's pretty much the same. What's different is related arts classes are really scheduled by the number of classrooms you have and the availability within the cycle. The elementary schools aren't on an exact period schedule like middle school or high school would be. So what we look at is the durations of time that the classes are taught, how many times they could be taught within the cycle, and that tells us the potential for scheduling versus the number of classrooms that are actually scheduled to generate that utilization. And then finally, down at the bottom, the cafeteria, we record the guidelines sizes, and I'll just point out that the guidelines are based on, I think it's derived from the MSBA 2 lunch periods, which we don't often see. We record the existing cafeteria size, and then we have to, what we do here is we go through and look at how many lunch waves to determine the utilization for those rooms. So the number of lunch waves determines how many students you can collectively accommodate as far as the enrollment, and therefore we calculate the capacity there. We've included kitchens on this as well, not from a utilization standpoint, but just to see what would be maybe the new construction standards versus what we're seeing in the schools. On the far right, you can see we've listed out shared spaces and what we were calling missing spaces. Again, all of the spaces here are accommodated in some fashion. They just may not have their own dedicated space. We also have listed other spaces. So within each school, on occasion, we'll find that there may be a district-wide special needs program. That's just information to know that should there be a larger decision about where district-wide programs may be housed, there may be space available in one school or not. We also know which schools have auditoriums, and in some cases we see the after-school program has a little bit of dedicated space, and some do not. So we're just recording what might be considered some unique spaces within the schools. I won't go through each one, but we have Bowen as an example, Burr, Mason Rice, Memorial Spalding, Pierce, Underwood, and Ward, as well as Williams. So all the schools are here. And in summary form, as far as the spaces are concerned, we thought Josh's was not legible. I don't think I can zoom in enough on this. We've included all 8 schools in the format that is the educational program. The 2 columns on the far right, sets of columns, are the educational program for either 14 or 18 classrooms, which we understand are the kind of models that have been recognized. So we've highlighted in red what is modular construction. We've outlined with red dotted lines some of the takeaways that we noted at the beginning regarding space. So a little bit of a cheat sheet on this page. We'll continue on, and again, I know we might want to come back for questions, but or should we?
I think continue through, and then we'll have the questions at the end.
Okay. Want to take us through, Peter?
Yeah, sure. So I'll focus, I think again, mainly just on building conditions. We're going to use Pierce as an example, but we will speak to all schools in some form as sort of an overview of what we are looking at and what our process is for evaluating the existing sites, the existing buildings for all 8 schools. So this is just sort of an overview of all 8 schools with the sort of site plan at the top. And basically the years above the black line indicate when the building was first constructed. So again, as I noted earlier, Underwood and Ward are the oldest of the 8 in the study at 100 years old, thereabouts. The years below represent sort of major changes or milestones. So an addition or a very significant renovation, an increase to the footprint, the building footprint or reconfiguration. What it does not necessarily include are smaller updates like capital improvements, like changing out the windows, ceilings, other things that might happen over a longer period of time, and sort of a smaller value or smaller change to the building. We've, like the space summary, we've also just highlighted in red which schools are currently using modular buildings as well for part of the program. So then I'll just jump to sort of next in the series, which is just an overall comparison of how big are these sites. And so basically the takeaway is that Bowen has the largest acreage. Obviously we know that there's a playground on site, the Thompsonville Playground, that might be sort of independently operated. So the effective area of what the school is actually using might be less than 11.5 acres, but in terms of the whole property, it's owned by the city in that way. I'll also just note that Williams at 3.1 acres will be adjusted with the inclusion of that new parcel that was recently acquired. And Underwood is the smallest of the 8 at 1 acre. Next, we looked a little bit at topography. Obviously, being on site, we could see what the grade changes are. We confirmed that with some GIS map information. And again, it's just sort of to understand what the challenges potentially are with each site. So, for instance, Bowen, Underwood, and Williams have a fairly flat site. And when we're talking about this topography, we're talking mainly just around the building. There might be other areas of the site that have a more dramatic topographic change, but we're looking just at what's immediately surrounding the building, thinking about how the school might evolve over time. And so the other 4 to 5 schools have a pretty significant change in grade at the building, which is essentially how they're set up. You can access the building from multiple levels around the site. And then finally, we looked a little bit at what is sort of overlaid on top of the site from a regulation standpoint. There are a few easements and right-of-ways that are something that might constrain, what can be built on the site in what areas. And I'll just note for Underwood and Williams, there are historic district overlays that might also have an impact on, what future changes might be needed or can be done from an exterior perspective. And as far as Mason Rice is concerned, we did see that there's quite a significant wetland overlay from the River Protection Act. So again, using Pierce just as an example of our process, we sort of took a snapshot of each school and sort of looked at how the site operates currently. So we look at, where the bus and car drop-offs and pickups are, how many parking spaces there are, what are the access points, what parts of the site are being used for what, in terms of fields, playgrounds, and whatnot. So Pierce is kind of just an example of, in this case, we're seeing that it's one of the few schools of the 8 where the car drop-off happens off-street, so the parking lot is large enough to accommodate a drop-off area. Busing happens on the street, from our understanding. And the Pierce playground is sort of contained within the building, and the fields are to the north, again, with a little bit of a grade change as you move north on the site. We'll just highlight a few of the points that we saw while we were on site, and some of the pictures sort of speak to that. From a site perspective, we are seeing that most of the entrances are not necessarily accessible. There's some stairs and some barriers to that. There is, however, an accessible entrance at the rear of the school, opposite where the main entrance is. There's also some challenges to get into the lower level, which is where the after school and the CAFs are, but that is accommodated with some limited use, limited application lifts to allow accessible access. Similarly for the playgrounds, they have sort of an older raised edging, so they're not quite fully accessible from sort of access, and sidewalks around that area do need some replacement. We did see some ponding. It was raining during the day that we were on site. So there is some ponding and potentially some underground drainage that needs to happen long term. And again, just in terms of the site itself, it does have a slope. So anytime you see that there might be some challenges to navigate with an accessible route on site. From a building condition perspective, as I mentioned earlier, there's only 2 boilers. They're original to the school. One of them is non-functional, so there's no redundancy. It also doesn't necessarily meet the city's electrification goals and their decarbonization initiatives. There is no sprinkler system, but there is obviously fire alarms and a fire alarm system. The HVAC systems sort of tied to the sort of boiler is at the end of life. The terminal units are showing signs of age. As I mentioned, there is no elevator, but there are lifts to allow some accessibility to the lower floor. Some finishes have been patched over the years. The ceilings have been updated as part of sort of a district initiative to get new ceilings and new lighting with new lighting control for more energy efficiency. And the roof, again, has some signs of advanced age, and it's an older system. And then again, the windows have been replaced in 2006, but as far as meeting new current energy codes, they should probably be replaced in a future renovation. So we did look at cost a little bit. So the initial study under Wood and Ward, we had an independent cost estimator from our consultant team do an estimate. For the other 6 schools, we didn't have the third-party cost estimator, so we're using data that was provided to us from Newton Public Buildings and their own internal facilities assessments for their long-term capital investment plan. So for some context, the total repair costs are really a product of the unique conditions of each facility. So in terms of Pierce being a small school, Memorial Spalding being a larger school, just because there's potentially a cost difference between the two doesn't necessarily mean that one has significant more priority over another just because of the inherent cost alone. There's more involved with understanding what the priority might be. And there might be more investment for the same amount of updates for a larger school versus a smaller school. And as I mentioned, we had a 2023 cost estimate done for Underwood and Ward. So these represent a snapshot in time and certainly would be adjusted as we move forward. And again, the scope of the work that's being estimated doesn't necessarily include any changes to program or altering the space sizes to meet the educational program. This is purely just bringing the schools up to sort of current codes, current building standards. It doesn't necessarily factor in costs for moving walls to make a classroom bigger to meet an educational program size. Again, using Pierce as an example, we're just citing the estimate that was provided to us from Newton Public Buildings. But based on the pie chart, you can see that sort of site and HVAC systems tend to have more of an impact. The site is really about updating stormwater drainage, making the site more accessible, as I mentioned, site lighting updates, maybe increasing the parking capacity and drop-off areas, and updating playgrounds as well. And then the HVAC side would be, updating the boilers, new ductwork, new terminal units for the classrooms. And so again, it's kind of looking at the systems as they are and seeing sort of what updates are needed to make the building last for another 50 years or so. So when you then compare across the 8 schools, you can kind of see what the distribution is. Again, taking into mind that the size of the school or the cost might not necessarily be reflective of what the most pressing needs are. And as I mentioned in the takeaways, we feel that Pierce, Underwood, and Ward represent the most in need of repair right now for the reasons that we mentioned previously. And then here's just another way of looking at that again, break it down by the system. So it reflects of that total cost of repair, what each system is contributing to that total cost. So I think the next step for us is going to be understanding the sort of space utilization plus building condition, and then forming some sort of system that understands what what might change in terms of what we think are the most pressing and most in need for prioritization. We also have appendices for.
We won't go through that.
More information.
Okay. Thank you for all that. A lot of information in here. I know it's it's overwhelming and there's lots of really big numbers with lots of commas and zeros, which is a little daunting. But I'll open it to the members for whatever questions we have. Barry?
Thanks. That was very helpful. I'm just curious, the numbers that you gave as examples, they're just to get the schools up to speed in terms of systems. It doesn't fix issues like a music room being in an auditorium or the lack of a proper cafeteria. Okay.
Amy?
I have some questions about the classifications about classroom sizes being good that is sort of at the front end of your presentation. You cited gen ed classrooms tending to be good sizes except at Underwood and at Ward. And then kindergartens tending to be good sizes except for Bowen, Mason, Rice, and Ward. When I look at the numbers, it looks to me like kindergarten sizes at Ward are actually one of the highest in the district currently, and that Williams is actually about half. I wonder if it's a typo. Says that Williams utilization for kindergarten to me looks like 59.1% with 13 students as an average class size, whereas Ward's is at 95.5% with 44 students with 21 at the average class size.
So I should clarify and say it's based on square footage of the room.
It's not about enrollment.
Right.
Okay. Got that. Thank you. And so good size is literally like a good sized room.
Yes.
That makes more sense to me. 900. Yeah. Had it. That makes much more sense to me. Thank you. And then when I look at the sort of building cost assessments, building condition assessments that you were showing earlier, some of that cost for Pierce has already been absorbed by the city council, correct? There's a $1.2 million donation for the roof. And then I think the same will be true for Mason Rice as well, correct? So yeah. And so I guess I just wondered, like, that will then reduce the required spending at both Pierce and Mason Rice. Does that at all change your calculus in terms of the highest need building still being Pierce's third?
I don't think
I
so.
see you saying no. I just wanted to know. Yeah.
No, go right ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Pearson's mechanical system got some benefits too, but it's funds are being allocated to address the highest need in that building right now. But we still have to maintain our buildings.
Josh, go ahead.
Thank you. I couldn't hear Stephanie on that, so hopefully I'm not repeating, but the I just mentioned that the Pierce School is, if you take a look at all six, excluding Ward and Underwood, if you take a look at the other six schools, 3 of them were done, were part of the tier 2 projects that occurred in the late 90s and 2000s. Of the remaining 3, so I consider those to be in better condition, and I think Perkins Eastman picked up on that. Of the remaining 3, Pierce is both the oldest and has had the least amount of capital work done since it was constructed. So I think that while the roof is certainly going to improve the conditions at Pierce, the rest of the building has had essentially no major capital improvements since it was constructed, unlike a lot of those other 6 elementary schools. So it will make a dent, but I don't see it really moving the needle in the aggregate.
Thanks, Josh. Emily, go ahead.
I also just want to mention the fact that building condition is very important, but it's only one part of the puzzle. And we also got some reports on the other parts of the puzzle, which has to do with what spaces are actually available and what spaces are missing or need to be enlarged. So building condition, while it has a numeric price tag associated with it in this, is only one part of a bigger picture in terms of prioritization.
Thanks for that clarification. Other questions? You look like you were ready. Yeah, go ahead, Rashid.
So The question around the cafeteria and kitchen and shared space. I noticed for the cafeteria, you're essentially looking at the number of lunch periods to get to utilization. Right? And what we've seen in during school visits is the principals working backwards and saying, here's how much space we have, and therefore here's how many lunch periods we need to break out the students into, just so we can make sure we can serve them. And is there a recommendation for size given a certain enrollment, say 400 students or whatever it might be for a particular design? Is there a recommendation for what size the cafeteria should be?
Okay, I can say it's the answer is a little bit complicated because we do have educational program guidelines. They are based on 2 seatings, which we don't see. So I think the adequate size is, obviously absolutely tied to what the preference would be for the number of lunch waves. And I know there is some variety. I don't know if there's a declared number.
So everyone can hopefully hear it. So Josh, jump in too. But so in the MSBA space standards, they base it on 2 lunch periods in terms of size. Also in the MSBA space standards, that's for a cafetorium. So it's intended to be used as a cafeteria and an auditorium. In many of these buildings, they have a separate auditorium actually. And also going back in time, many if not all of these schools, I can't remember off the top of my head, the schools were not built with cafeterias because kids went home for lunch. So they were carved out of existing space where they could be. So that's a lot of what you're seeing in the variation of kind of how they're accommodated. I actually sat down with Mistro to go over the kitchens and how they were, they're kind of confirming what the space plans were showing. So during COVID, many of the schools were doing individual lunch periods. I don't know if it was across the board, but I know most, if not all, were doing individual lunch periods. And in talking to some of the principals, some of them kept that because they liked the way it worked. So in some schools they have 3. Actually, I think most of them have 4, 5, and sometimes 6 lunch periods. So what the chart actually shows is how many students could be accommodated depending on the number of lunch periods you have. In an ideal world, you would have a space large enough to function, or in the space standard we're comparing it to, you'd have a space that's a cafetorium that would accommodate. It's spaced based on 2 lunch periods, just in terms of the square footage. Hopefully that makes sense.
No, it does. And so Stephanie, is that what we put in place for, say, the new building? So Zervis has a cafetorium. Is it roughly corresponding to 2 lunch periods there?
Exactly.
It is.
For all of our new buildings. It's based on the MSBA space standards, based on 2 lunch periods and the function as a cafeteria and auditorium. Lincoln Elliott's slightly different. It still has the same space for the cafeteria really, but it's in an existing building, and you actually have the bonus of an auditorium that's existing.
Of an enormous auditorium, right? No, thank you.
Something.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this very comprehensive, somewhat technical, report. Unfortunately, Newton has all those old school buildings, and now we have, almost brand new, some built a few years back. So it's sharp contrast. Sometimes I think some my colleagues will have same feeling when walking to the old school building when a lot of issues, and we feel quite, heavy to think about those parents who send their kids spend all those years in this old building. And here you mentioned the 3 most, needy school buildings: the Pierce, Underwood, and Ward. And for the Pierce, for the Ward and Underwood, both are almost 100 years. Underwood are going to celebrate 100 years anniversary this year, and we've got the invitation. So, but this is the oldest, and the Ward, you know, 96, 96 years old. So, the other school, the Pierce, which was built in 1954, also, you know, most in need of repair. So could you highlight a bit how serious these school buildings, and so help us to understand whether, you know, the repair is cost effective, or think about rebuild school buildings? Of course, we have to think about the Underwood and the Ward, because student low enrollment of these two schools, there might be other options. But just impress us regarding these three school buildings, how bad a situation, and so we could understand a little bit better the urgency of these school buildings.
You want to jump in, Joe? I'm gonna hand that one off to you.
Sure. Yep, I'm happy to take that on. So it's a great question, Anping. There's a few things to unwrap there. You know, first and foremost, I think that, and this was stated before, but it's worth mentioning again. The costs that are identified in this report are really just a reflection of what it would take to bring the building up, replace the major building systems, bring it up to code. But it does not, as Emily Prenner so articulately put, it does not address the space needs, and those are significant. You know, the Pierce School, for example, Rajiv, the cafeteria is, I believe, it's got to be the smallest in the district. And what it means is that you're essentially constantly cycling lunches through that cafeteria. And, you know, that alone has, you know, the cafeteria is both a condition issue and a space needs issue. And it has a ripple effect on how the Pierce School operates. You know, it's more nuanced, though. For those that have been around for a while, back when we were talking about Ainger and Cabot, it was a very easy conversation. The conditions were very bad. The enrollment was very high, and it made for a very easy conversation. As we get to these 6 elementary schools, it's going to be a little more challenging to have that conversation. We're going to have to have discussions as a school committee, as a community. How do we approach these schools? Are they addition renovations? Are they complete teardowns and new construction? What are we comfortable with that may not meet MSBA guidelines, and what are we not comfortable with? It's a bit more gray. I would say that in general, for MSBA programs anyways, communities will study new construction, addition renovation, and a repair option, a base code option. I don't know if any of our friends from Perkins Eastman know of any of these, but I have not seen a community go with a repair only option, because straight across the board, the primary reason is it does not meet those space needs, those space guidelines. It just addresses the building systems. So it's an important consideration, and I think it's important because it feeds into our capital improvement plan and our capital planning, that being the repair only option. But it does not mean that those values really represent whether or not the buildings should be completely gut renovated and added onto, or torn down and new buildings built. I hope that helps, Anping.
And I just want to piggyback also that this is the data we're collecting to help inform our conversations going forward, because we're going to be looking at enrollment. Josh mentioned, like, we were over enrolled when Ainger, Cabot, and Zervis were queued up into the pipeline. And now, you know, we're looking again at our enrollment, and it's one piece of the puzzle as we start those conversations.
And just quick follow-up question. So these 3 schools conditions seems worst among the, this group. So how serious we need to repair them? In a couple of years, or in 5 years, we have to do something, or we can wait longer? I assume certain things like boiler, if you have a problem, you need to fix right away. Certain things you might wait a couple of years, but what's the thinking on that?
every six, I mean, David Stickney is looking at it every day. And then every 6 months, we're talking about the capital improvement plan. So we're always checking in and having conversations about the urgency. So we're replacing roofs to extend the life of the building. We're replacing boilers to extend the life of the building. So that'll all come into the capital improvement program conversation.
Okay.
I would add to that on Ping that, so Ward and Underwood are the two highest priorities. I think that's clear, and I think everybody understands that. At the same time, we know where we're at with our current capital projects. Countryside and Franklin are going to take us through 2027. We need to think about our relationship with MSBA and whether we want to submit future grant applications to them. But the bottom line is we have quite a few years left to just finish what we have that we're working on right now. And then at that point, we can start to transition and start to think about Ward and Underwood. And then after we think about Ward and Underwood, we can start thinking about Pierce and the other elementary schools and eventually the middle schools. So it's not something that I think we are suggesting that we need to roll up our sleeves and start work immediately on. But we're going to, at the same time, have to simultaneously invest in these schools in the coming years, with small projects to make sure that we're doing right by those communities. And the Pierce roof is a good example of that. The Ward parking lot was another example. The Underwood roof was another example. So those types of smaller projects will need to continue.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Tamika?
Thanks. So a comment that ties in rather nicely, Josh, to what you were just saying, specific to the middle schools. And I thank Perkins Eastman for your data and analysis. I think that's wonderful for us to be able to have that full view, that rich kind of understanding about the space utilization and building condition of our schools, but it's an incomplete understanding at this point. We know we have a Rolodex of schools that I would say they're offline. They're either being renovated or have been renovated. And so we don't have to really worry about those. Then within that next kind of tranche, we have the elementary schools that haven't yet been addressed. And that's where your work focuses, which is, again, it's great to have that data. Then there's that separate tranche of middle schools and high schools, the secondary tranche, that we don't really have this new objectively reasonable analysis of their condition. So I think for purposes of having that full, thoughtful discussion, I really would love for us to be able to map that out. Because if we're looking at this work from Perkins Eastman tonight as understanding the priorities for our next, that we next have to look at for our schools, at some point we have to interlay our middle schools and our secondary schools into that picture. So I thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation and your work. It's very good. And that's a plug for us to start thinking how we do this holistically. So that's it. Thank you.
Mayor Fuller?
If money were no object, there'd be a lot of things that we would do. We would immediately be working on Ward, Underwood, and Pierce.
And if we had 3 more Joshes and Alexes and
certainly the capacity of a Stephanie, a Josh, and Alex is also a limiting factor, but I would say the more critical one is just sheer dollars. The debt service capacity of the city really translates into the need for any of these school buildings if we want to work on them in the next, I'm going to say decade. We'll need debt exclusion overrides by our voters to support them to move forward. So I think we'll have to be thinking about that. And then we will also much prefer that some of them, if not most of them, get grants from the state through the MSBA program. And then that becomes even more complicated because the MSBA has strong feelings about the number of students in the school, and we'll have to sort through the tension between neighborhood schools, which Newton loves and prides ourselves on, versus the size of any particular elementary school. So that it's going to be complicated, and our needs are greater than our dollars, without making some challenging decisions, which parents will care deeply, deeply, deeply about. And parents both want us to move quickly, but do all the schools. So it's gonna be a lot of discussions, and we'll need a lot of feedback and input and willingness of the community to help us make these hard decisions.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, yeah, I think this is just one very important piece of the puzzle as we try to think about this whole big problem of how this whole thing's supposed to fit together over, a period of time that's going to outlast us. So thank you, gentlemen, for the report and all the great information.
Thank you.
And Stephanie.
Yeah.
And Josh.
Yes, and Stephanie and Josh, thank you as well. All right, we have two last items on the agenda here. First is a discussion and vote on the Newton Educational Secretaries Association Return to Work Agreement, which is currently in place, but and was discussed and voted on in executive session, but for open session purposes, we need to confirm that. So with that, is there any discussion, or would anyone want to just bring forth a motion there? Yep. Rajiv?
Yep. I move that we authorize the school committee chair, Chris Bresky, to sign the return to work MOA with NESA, the Newton Educational Secretaries Association.
Okay, is there a second to that?
I'm going to second this motion.
Okay, that's moved by Rajiv, seconded.
You just made them one person. Yeah.
Yes, I did. Thank you. Rajiv, seconded by Anping. Excuse me. I just made you guys, gave you like a Benifer moment there. That was all right. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, with that, we'll have a roll call vote. Ward 1.
Yes.
Ward 2 is yes. Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6? Yes, Paul had to drop off. Ward 7?
Yes.
And Ward 8?
Yes.
And Mayor Fuller.
Yes.
Okay. That passes, and that is ratified, I guess. And then the final is a discussion and vote on non-aligned salary staff increases, which was also discussed in executive session. Is there any comments there? Okay. If someone wants to bring forth the motion, I think we should at least go through what our thinking here was in some level and make sure that's clear.
I'll make the motion.
Yep, Tamika?
So I move to authorize for the school committee to authorize a 2.5% salary increase for all non-aligned staff members, retroactive back to January 1st, 2024. That piece important? Yeah.
Okay, is there a second to that?
Second.
Okay, moved by Tamika, seconded by Barry. So I guess I'll just kind of, I think, summarize a bit what we discussed here. You know, I think historically we've had this increase at 3%, and that has been in place in part to reflect the fact that this covers actually a fairly broad range of staff. So it's not just our central staff and superintendent. It is other folks who are not part of collective bargaining agreements, who do not go through the stepping and lanes that exist within our collective bargaining agreements. And you know, that percentage, I think, over time has been intended to reflect that. Obviously, with the negotiation process that went on with the NTA, and having 2.5% as the solely cost of living increase there, and you know, recognizing that there are folks who would, you know, sort of equate to that top step, I guess, if you wanted to think about it in that regards. I believe that's how that, you know, that 2.5 number kind of came about. You know, I think you could certainly make the argument for you know, sticking to the 3% that has been out there for the, you know, for those reasons, that there are those folks who, you know, wouldn't be equating to a top step in a collective bargaining agreement as well. I think there's folks on our central staff and beyond who have done, you know, a tremendous amount of work over just the first month of this year. And, you know, I think there was let's say there was a very robust discussion on that point. I don't know, maybe I'll stop there if there's anything anyone else would want to add. Tamika, go ahead.
I think I'll just say that we have maintained as a committee throughout our negotiating process that we have deep respect and appreciation for our staff, full stop. That deep respect and appreciation that we have for our staff, there's also the realities of financial challenges that our district has faced. And so those things combined are reflected in our ability to offer compensation to all of our staff. And so it shouldn't be the thinking that we don't have appreciation for our staff and we don't value the endlessly exhaustive and wonderful work that they do on behalf of this district and students of this district. We do. And so it's been a challenging year, and we recognize that it's been challenging for everyone. And we hope that there are better days ahead. I'll stop there.
Okay. Any other comments? Ping?
I'd like to echo Tamika's sentiment. Yes, and past few weeks, of course, past months, and it was particularly difficult. But we certainly appreciate very much that, you know, the central staff, the leadership team working so hard, you know, and and Nolan's leadership, it was very challenging. And in that sense, we really deeply appreciate that. And I agree that the financial situation is also challenging at this moment, but we will keep in mind when the situation improves, then I will be one of the first to, to support any financial, increase or consideration for the better compensation. So I think it's important for us to acknowledge this kind of difficult feeling towards this motion and proposal. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. That motion has been put forth and seconded. Roll call vote. Ward 1.
Yes.
Ward 2 is yes. Ward 3.
Yes.
Ward 4.
Yes.
Ward 5.
Yes.
Ward 6.
Absolutely.
Is not here. Ward 7.
Abstain.
Abstains. Ward 8.
Yes.
And Ward 9.
Yes.
Okay. So that's 7, 1 absent, and 1 abstention. Okay. That concludes the agenda for this evening. Is there something, Amy? Nope. Okay. Our next meeting is, Lisa's when our next meeting? March 18th? March 18th. We are adjourned. Thank you.